Ever feel that like knot in your stomach? You know, those racing thoughts, the worry that just won't quit?
Oh, yeah.
Well, today we're diving deep into How to Stop Worrying and Start Living by Dale Carnegie,
Classic.
to unpack his wisdom and
Alright.
see how it applies to your life today.
Yeah, and what's so interesting about Carnegie is that he doesn't just preach, from an ivory tower.
Right.
Before he became the Dale Carnegie,
Yeah.
he was wrestling with worry himself.
Really?
Oh, yeah. He was stuck in a job he hated, feeling trapped and bitter.
So what shifted for him?
Well, he had this realization
Okay.
that he was chasing the wrong kind of success, and he made this decision to focus on making a living
I like that.
instead of just making money.
Yeah.
And I think that's a distinction a lot of us can relate to.
Absolutely. I mean, so instead of just grinding away at something that was soul-crushing,
Yes.
he decided to pursue work that actually resonated with him.
Exactly. And even though he'd actually faced rejection as a teacher initially, he decided to give it another go.
Wow.
He started teaching public speaking at night schools,
Okay.
which left his days open for writing.
And this wasn't just some cushy gig, right?
No, not at all. Like he was...
He was thrown into the deep end. I mean, he
Yeah.
was teaching adults who were paying for results,
Right.
not just college credit.
Exactly.
So he had to make those sessions engaging and impactful, or he'd be out of a job.
Oh, wow.
And that kind of pressure cooker environment, I think, really forced him to connect with his students
Yeah.
on a whole other level.
It's almost like he was unknowingly building the skills he'd need for his future success
Yeah,
as an author and a speaker.
absolutely.
By helping others overcome their challenges, he was honing his own ability to communicate and inspire.
That's such a great point.
So how does all of this resonate with your goals and values,
That's a big question.
right? Are you on a path that truly lights you up?
Yeah.
Or are you, like Carnegie was at first, stuck in a cycle of worry and discontent? Yeah. Is there a point in your life where you might need to prioritize fulfillment over external measures of success like Carnegie did?
Now, Carnegie didn't stop at finding fulfilling work.
Right.
He dove deep into practical techniques for managing worry.
He did.
And one of his most famous is the concept of day-tight compartments.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
So can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, he draws this parallel with the watertight compartments you find on a ship.
Okay.
Just as those compartments prevent a leak from flooding the entire vessel,
Okay.
Carnegie suggests that we can mentally seal off the past and the future
Okay.
to really focus on the present moment.
Got it.
He actually brings up this incredible story about Sir William Ogier,
Okay.
who was a renowned physician urging Yale students to live each day as a self-contained unit.
Wow. So he was a big proponent of.
He was all about shutting the iron doors on past regrets
Right.
and anxieties about the future. He
Right.
said, cultivate the habit of a life of day-tight compartments.
Powerful stuff.
It
sounds simple in theory,
It does.
but putting it into practice
Right.
in this always-on world,
I know.
it feels impossible.
It can feel that way. But imagine your worries are like overflowing emails.
Okay.
Day-tight compartments are like creating folders to organize and prioritize them.
Okay.
You acknowledge the emails exist,
Yeah.
but you choose when and how to engage with them,
Oh, yeah.
preventing them from hijacking your entire day.
Okay. I like that.
Yeah.
So how do we actually make this day-tight compartment thing actually work?
Well, Carnegie outlines a 3-step technique for handling that paralyzing worry. First, analyze the situation and honestly assess the worst possible outcome.
Okay.
What's the absolute worst case scenario?
And then, do we try to avoid it at all costs?
Actually, step 2 is where it gets interesting.
Yep.
Carnegie suggests that we actually accept that worst case scenario mentally.
Wait, seriously. Embrace the potential train wreck.
It might seem counterintuitive,
Yeah.
but hear me out. By accepting the worst, we reduce its power to control us.
Okay.
We acknowledge the potential for loss or failure, but we don't let it consume us.
I'm starting to see the logic here.
Yeah.
So what's the final step?
Step 3 is all about action.
Okay.
Instead of spiraling into anxiety,
Yeah.
we channel our energy into problem solving and mitigating the potential damage.
Okay.
We work to improve upon the worst.
So Carnegie uses this example of a businessman on the verge of losing $20,000.
Yeah.
A fortune back then.
Huge amount.
Talk about a real-world test of this technique.
Oh, for sure. This guy went through all 3 steps. He accepted the potential loss.
Right.
And then with a clear head, came up with a solution.
Okay.
He figured out that by investing an additional $5,000, he could actually turn the situation around.
So he leaned into the discomfort
He did.
and figured out a way forward?
Yes, and it paid off.
Wow.
Instead of losing $20,000, he ended up making $15,000.
Talk about turning lemons into lemonade.
Right.
It's amazing how accepting the worst can actually free up our mental energy for creative problem solving.
It is. It reminds me of that saying, what you resist persists. By resisting the possibility of a negative outcome.
Right.
We often give it more power over us, but by accepting it, we can move through it and maybe even turn it into an opportunity. It's funny how we blow things out of proportion in our minds, you know?
Well, tell me about it.
Carnegie has this tool for that too.
Okay.
He talks about the law of averages.
Okay.
And it's not about like complex math equations. It's about putting our worries into perspective.
It's basically reminding ourselves that our anxieties are often way more dramatic than reality.
Exactly. He tells this story about a guy named Jim Grant who was terrified of bridges collapsing and trains derailing.
Oh my gosh.
Imagine the stress every time he traveled.
I can barely handle a bumpy flight, so I can sympathize.
Well, Jim finally realized he'd crossed tons of bridges and taken countless train trips without incident. He called himself out on his own irrational fear.
That's a powerful realization.
It is.
Sometimes we need that reality check to break free from those spiraling anxieties.
It's like when you finally check under the bed for the monster and
Right.
realize it was just your imagination.
Okay, so we've tackled accepting the worst and using the law of averages
Right.
to calm our fears.
Yeah.
What else does Carnegie have up his sleeve?
He talks a lot about forgiveness,
Okay.
both for ourselves and for better relationships.
Mhm.
He even compares holding grudges to drinking poison and expecting the other person to die.
Ouch, that's a potent image.
It is.
We think we're hurting the other person, but really we're just tormenting ourselves.
Yeah, he tells this story about a young man named George Rona who applied for a job, and he made some grammar errors in his letter.
Uh-oh.
And the businessman was furious and sent back a scathing reply.
I bet Rona was ready to fire back a scorching email of his own.
He was, but then he had a change of heart. Instead of responding with anger, he wrote a different letter.
Okay.
Thanking the businessman for pointing out his mistakes
Wow.
and promising to improve.
What happened?
Well, the businessman was so impressed by his humility that he hired him on the spot.
You got it.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that choosing forgiveness, even when it's tough, can have surprising results.
For sure.
It's like taking the high road, not just for moral reasons,
Right.
but because it can lead to better outcomes for everyone involved.
Absolutely. Carnegie also uses the example of General Eisenhower,
Okay.
who famously said, "Dad never wastes a minute thinking about people he doesn't like."
What a powerful way to live.
It is.
It's a conscious choice, isn't it?
It is.
To let go of that negativity and focus on the good.
Yeah. But how do we actually do that
Right.
when those negative thoughts just keep circling back?
Yeah.
Well, Carnegie suggests finding a purpose bigger than yourself.
Okay.
He tells this incredible story about Lawrence Jones, an educator who was nearly lynched in the early 1900s.
Wait, seriously?
Yeah.
What happened?
Well, he was dragged from a church by an angry mob,
Oh my God.
accused of inciting rebellion,
Wow.
and they were about to hang him when someone in the crowd shouted, "Let's make the blankety blank blank talk before he burns."
Talk about a high-stakes presentation.
It was, what did he do?
So Jones, with a rope around his neck, took the chance to plead his case.
Wow.
Not for his own life, but for the cause of education for impoverished Black children.
That's incredible. So he basically turned a near-death experience into an opportunity to advocate for something he believed in.
He did. He spoke with such passion that the mob was moved. They not only spared his life, they even took up a collection for his school.
Talk about the power of conviction.
Right.
It's like his belief in his cause transcended the hate and fear
Absolutely.
in that moment.
And you know, when he was asked later if he hated the men who tried to kill him, Jones said he was too busy with his work to hate them.
He was so consumed by his purpose that there was no room for negativity.
That's such a powerful lesson. Finding something that gives our lives meaning can really help us rise above,
It can.
even the most difficult circumstances.
It's true. It shifts our perspective,
Yeah.
gives us strength.
And speaking of perspective shifts,
Yeah.
Carnegie also emphasizes embracing setbacks as opportunities for growth.
He does.
He shares the story of a woman who lost everything during the Great Depression.
Oh, yeah.
Her land, her home,
Everything.
almost her family.
That's heartbreaking. How did she even begin to cope with that?
I know.
She was so desperate she considered ending her life.
Oh, my.
But then she had this profound realization.
Okay.
She said to herself, I've hit bottom and I've stood it. There's no place to go now but up.
So she chose to find hope in the darkest of times.
She did. She stopped dwelling on her losses.
Yeah.
And she focused on rebuilding her life.
Okay.
She found work, supported her family, and created a new future for herself.
And what happened?
And she ended up finding a greater sense of peace
Wow.
than she'd ever known before.
It's incredible how resilient the human spirit can be.
It is.
Even when it feels like everything is falling apart, we have the power to choose hope over despair.
That's right. Carnegie reminds us that setbacks, however devastating, can make us stronger.
Yeah.
More resourceful by accepting the inevitable.
Right.
And focusing on what we can control.
Mm.
We can transform challenges into opportunities for growth.
And that brings us to one of Carnegie's most practical concepts,
Yeah.
the stop-loss order on our worries.
Yeah.
Okay, I've heard of stop-loss orders in investing,
Right.
but how does that apply to our anxieties?
Think of it like this, just as a stop-loss order limits your financial losses.
Okay.
This technique helps you limit the emotional energy you spend on unproductive worries.
So it's about recognizing which worries are worth our attention
Exactly.
and which ones are just draining us without leading to solutions.
Yes, Carnegie himself used this when his novel was rejected by his agent.
Oh.
He could have spiraled into self-doubt, but instead he mentally cut his losses.
Okay.
He acknowledged that the novel wasn't working
Yeah.
and shifted his focus to other projects.
It's like saying, okay, worry, you get 15 minutes of my time, but then I'm moving on to something productive.
Exactly. What's a worry you can put a stop-loss order on today?
That's a great question to ask yourself.
It is. And building on that idea of self-awareness, Carnegie also dives into the importance of embracing our individuality.
So stop trying to fit ourselves into someone else's mold.
Precisely. He tells the story about trying to imitate famous actors when he was younger.
Okay.
He thought he could combine all their best qualities
Yeah.
and create this like super actor persona,
Right.
but it just didn't work.
It's like trying to squeeze yourself into a costume that's not made for you.
Right.
You end up feeling uncomfortable and inauthentic.
He also shares this advice that Irving Berlin gave to a young George Gershwin.
Okay.
So Berlin was really impressed by Gershwin's talent, and he offered him a job as his musical secretary.
Wait, so he wanted to hire Gershwin as his assistant?
Yes, but Berlin added this crucial caveat.
Okay.
He told Gershwin, don't take the job.
Okay.
If you do, you may develop into a second-rate Berlin, but if you insist on being yourself someday, you'll become a first-rate Gershwin.
And that's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
Gershwin went on to become a musical icon by following his own path.
He did.
It's a reminder that trying to be someone else will only lead to frustration. True happiness comes from embracing our authentic selves.
It does. You know, it's interesting how Carnegie brings up faith and prayer as a means of finding peace and overcoming worry.
Yeah.
It's a topic that can be so personal,
Absolutely.
and I appreciate how he handles it with the sensitivity.
Yeah, he acknowledges that not everyone shares the same beliefs, but focuses on the potential for spiritual practices, whatever form they may take, to offer comfort and a sense of connection
Absolutely.
to something bigger than ourselves.
He shares some really powerful stories, like the one about the missionary in India
What?
who was battling some serious health issues,
Right.
and he was on the verge of giving up.
Oh, wow.
This missionary was at his wit's end when he had this profound experience during prayer.
Okay.
He felt a voice asking him, are you truly ready for this work?
And what did he say?
And he was honest. You know, he admitted he felt he'd reached his limit.
Oh, wow.
And the voice then said, if you will turn that over to me and not worry about it, I will take care of it.
Wow.
And the missionary instantly felt this overwhelming sense of peace.
And his health actually improved.
Dramatically.
Wow.
He attributed it to his newfound faith and his willingness to surrender his worries.
It's a powerful reminder that sometimes letting go and trusting in something beyond ourselves can bring about incredible change.
There's also the story of John R. Anthony, a salesman who was going through a really rough patch, facing rejection after rejection. He was ready to give up and go home. He just stumbled into a church and found himself drawn to this message of hope and faith.
It sounds like he was really searching for something to hold on to.
He spent hours pouring out his anxieties and fears in prayer.
Yeah.
And as he prayed, his despair transformed into courage and determination. He went back to his work with this renewed sense of purpose.
Okay.
And his sales actually started to take off.
It's like tapping into a source of strength and resilience.
It is.
That helps us rise above our challenges.
And these stories, while rooted in a Christian context, really speak to a universal human need.
I agree.
For connection, purpose, and hope.
Absolutely.
You know, whether you find solace in traditional religion, nature, or acts of service.
Right.
Connecting with something that gives you a sense of meaning can have a profound impact on your ability to handle stress.
And worry.
Exactly.
Now, Carnegie also recognizes that some worries are valid.
Of course.
Especially when they involve things we can control.
Right.
Like that constant pressure to be perfect.
Yeah.
And the fear of criticism.
He reminds us that criticism is often a sign that we're doing something worthwhile.
Okay.
That we're standing out from the crowd.
So instead of shrinking back, we should view it as a sign that we're making an impact.
Exactly. He even quotes Schopenhauer, who said, vulgar people take huge delight in the faults and follies of great men. So when those self-doubt whispers start creeping in, remember that criticism can actually be a badge of honor.
I like that. And what about those inevitable mistakes we all make?
Yeah.
How do we keep those from paralyzing us?
Carnegie emphasizes learning from our mistakes.
Right.
Not letting them define us.
Okay.
He tells this story about Deems Taylor, a music critic who received a letter calling him all sorts of awful names.
Oh, wow. I can only imagine.
But Taylor, instead of getting defensive, actually read the letter aloud on his radio show.
He had a sense of humor about it.
He did, and his listeners loved it.
That's great.
It's a great reminder that sometimes the best response to negativity is to just laugh it off. Don't give it the power to sting.
It's like that old saying, don't wrestle with a pig. You both get dirty, but the pig enjoys it.
Exactly. Carnegie also talks about the importance of taking action.
Okay.
He highlights the work of Dr. Joseph Pratt, who had a unique approach to treating patients suffering from worry-induced illnesses.
So instead of just telling them to relax and think positive thoughts, he actually gave them tools to deal with their anxieties.
He created a class in applied psychology where patients would discuss their worries, learn coping mechanisms, and support each other.
And it worked.
It was incredibly effective.
Wow.
It highlights the power of community and sharing our experiences.
Yeah.
We're not meant to go through tough times alone.
Sometimes just knowing that you're not the only one struggling can be a huge relief.
It can be. Carnegie also stresses good working habits as a key to reducing stress.
Okay.
Planning our days, prioritizing tasks, making decisions efficiently. These are all things within our control.
So it's about creating a sense of order and structure in our lives.
Yeah. So to minimize that feeling of being overwhelmed.
Exactly. He uses the example of Charles Luckman, who became the president of the Pepsodent Company. He was known for waking up at 5 every morning to plan his day and prioritize his tasks.
Wow.
He understood that success comes from consistent effort and deliberate choices.
It's like laying the groundwork for a successful day before the chaos even has a chance to set in.
And before we wrap up, I want to mention that Carnegie dedicates a big chunk of his book to choosing a career. He recognizes that it's a major life decision that can cause a lot of worry and uncertainty.
It's one of those things that can keep you up at night wondering if you're on the right path.
Exactly. He encourages thorough research, talking to people in those fields and keeping an open mind about different paths. He even suggests offering to pay someone for their time and advice.
It's an investment in your future, really tapping into the wisdom of those who've been there.
Absolutely.
Can save you a lot of heartache down the line. And ultimately, Carnegie's message boils down to focusing on what we can control.
Right.
He tells the story about a woman diagnosed with a terminal illness.
Oh, wow.
Given only a short time to live.
It doesn't get much more challenging than that. How did she respond?
Instead of giving into despair, she booked a trip around the world.
Really?
Her doctors were worried, but she was determined to live life on her own terms.
Good for her.
She defied the odds and had this amazing experience proving that even in the face of adversity, we can choose to embrace life.
So what's one small step you can take today?
Yeah.
To put one of Carnegie's principles into practice?
It's a great question.
Maybe it's setting aside time for reflection, starting a new healthy habit, or reaching out to someone you need to forgive.
Whatever it is, remember that conquering worry is a journey, not a destination. By incorporating even small changes, we can shift our mindset, reduce stress, and create a life filled with peace, purpose, and joy.
And if you want to go deeper, I highly recommend checking out How to Stop Worrying and Start Living. It's packed with timeless advice that can help anyone struggling with anxiety. Until next time, fellow deep divers, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep striving to live your best, most worry-free life.